Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here, but as I mentioned previously, we talk about all types of physical media here. And when I put out the call to see if you guys would be curious to check out a video about VHS only movies, that seemed to be something you were interested in, and that is something I have definitely been interested in this year. I used to, obviously, like a lot of you, I've been collecting movies since I was in high school. And, I grew up in the era of the VHS video store. I worked in those stores for about a decade of my life. There was some transition to DVD towards the end of my tenure in video stores. But a lot of the time was spent with VHS. And so I collected a lot of VHS. And like a lot of folks, as DVD transitioned over, I got rid of a lot of my VHS, which I do regret. But that said, I did find, and I have found over the years, that a lot of VHS-only titles have ended up ripped to YouTube in some form or another. But here in 2024, I sort of had a moment of like, wait a minute. There's still so much stuff, and this is not news by any means. There's still so much stuff that's unavailable outside of VHS, and there's a lot of it that I don't know. And so as I've been doing the Pure Cinema podcast for coming up on 8 years in February, and one of our mission statements is to dig out, lesser talked about gems. I found that I started with lists on Letterboxd, VHS only lists, which sometimes aren't fully updated because a lot of things, get announced all the time. And, there may be some movies in this stack I'm going to talk about today that get announced by the end of the year, for all I know. I mean, it's so hard to know what's going on in that world and the extenuating circumstances that involve why or why not certain films get released on disc and why they don't. But at this moment, as far as I know, none of these have official DVD or Blu-ray releases, and none of them are officially streaming that I'm aware of. And some of these may have, rips on YouTube. But I think the other thing for me is I got sick of watching pixelated rips on YouTube, and I found that, and I've mentioned this before, but I have an older 1080p television that still had RCA inputs. I got a very cheap VCR, and I just hooked up the RCAs to the RCA port on the back of my 1080 TV, and it looks really pretty good. Like just, a notch below DVD maybe, in some cases, but just way better than a pixelated, compressed YouTube transfer. And so I started going through my garage. I traded in and sold off a bunch of Laserdiscs that I'd collected over the years that have nice editions on Blu-rays and 4Ks these days. And actually traded them in mostly to a place called Whammy Analog Media here in Los Angeles. Really great store that you want to check out if you're in LA. They are like the coolest Suncoast video you've ever encountered, basically, because it's all sale titles, and they just have an eye for rare stuff. They're aware of what's available and what's not, and so that's a big part of what they do. But anyway, so I traded in a bunch of stuff there. I got some money from that, and I just started looking at Whammy and eBay, and I spent a little money on some of this stuff, and it just was a thing where, like, this is important to me. I want to be able to have these physically. I don't want to have to worry about YouTube and things getting taken down. And so it's been an exciting journey for me, and I've discovered quite a few interesting films. And some of these you may be aware of already, but this is just part one. And if you guys like this, maybe I'll do another part, because I have definitely amassed quite a group of tapes in the past 4 or 5 months. And it's a lot of fun stuff, and stuff that I'll probably end up talking about. At least I'm holding back a little bit some of the discoveries I'll talk about on Pure Cinema later, but it's a lot of fun stuff. So I have about 10 titles here. And so we'll go through these one at a time. This first one is a discovery for me for sure. It is called The Courier of Death. And this is definitely a movie that VHS tape heads know about, but it was one that had slipped by me. It gets a mention in a action movies on the cheap book that I have that's really great. And it's super fun. I mean, this tape is actually in good shape, although the case, one of the things I ended up getting was some plastic sleeve protectors. This case is actually slit down the side and was in a white amray, but I put it into this and I think it looks pretty nice. In the fiery action tradition of Death Wish, the Courier of Death explodes with destruction and revenge. J.D. Blackman had it all, a loving family, devoted a wife, and a good job. One day, without warning, his world suddenly shattered before his eyes. As the courier for a large company, Blackman is on what he assumes to be a routine delivery, but a secret organization sets out to steal the contents of his briefcase and kills his best friend and his wife to ensure he complies with them. With no one left to trust, Blackman seeks revenge. The Courier of Death delivers. So this is only like a 77-minute movie. It opens with like a great like car chase, like a van chase where they have like, I want to say they have a bunch of cash in a briefcase or something. And it's one of those sort of low budget regional kind of things, but it's super fun and, you know, it has some intenser moments and it's definitely one of my favorite discoveries of the year. This tape is really hard to find. Wasn't cheap. I think there's one on eBay right now. I want to say for like $80. I did not pay that much for this. But definitely one that there's a really weak, I want to say maybe there's a rip on YouTube, but it was just so soft I could really not make out the detail. My tape ended up looking really nice. Anyway, this is a VHS only title. Some of these titles you can find in bootleg DVD versions through places like DVD Lady or J4 Hi-Fi, I think the place is called. There's a bunch of them that will do effectively VHS transfers to DVD, and you can get those reasonably priced. You know, like this has at least one online you can get, maybe a couple, but definitely worth checking out. Well worth your time. A lot of fun. Next up, this one is super fun because I actually did a screening. My first VHS screening here in LA at another local video store I definitely recommend called Be Kind Video. And they do some regular screenings. Whammy also does screenings, by the way. They have a really nice setup there for screenings. But Be Kind tends to do kind of some bigger movies. Like Whammy does more indie and like they have deals with AGFA, or not deals, but they do stuff with AGFA and smaller films. I've learned a little bit about licensing, and movies like this are a little more expensive to play versus something from AGFA's catalog or... Anyway, so super fun VHS only screening. This movie's called Enemy Territory. It's from 1987, directed by Peter Manoogian. It's for Empire Pictures, which is, Charlie Band's company. Probably the best movie they ever did. God, I'm hoping this one maybe gets a Blu-ray soon. It could happen. This one I feel like could happen. Of all these, this one I'm most optimistic about. But it's basically about kind of a dopey white guy insurance agent who gets assigned to go to a black neighborhood in, I want to say they're in New York, but it was originally set in Chicago. And it's after dark. He's got to get an old woman to sign a policy that's like a $10,000 commission. And so he's getting I think he's getting 10 grand in cash from her. But on his way up the building in this bad neighborhood, he offends this little kid, this younger kid who's talking to some girl. And he happens to be part of a gang called the Vampires, which is run by Tony Todd, pre-Candyman. And he ends up offending the kid, and the whole Vampires gang comes after him. And Ray Parker Jr., that's him, the guy who sings the Ghostbusters theme song, who's actually really fun in this, is a telephone repairman who happens to be in the building and ends up helping out this dude try to find his way down the building, basically. It's sort of almost like a video game in some ways, and the vampires are searching every room, every floor. They're killing people. They're very scary. Tony Todd is great in this. And Jan Michael Vincent plays like a wheelchair-bound Vietnam vet who also lives in the building that ends up helping them out. And super fun. The screening went really well, and we really had a blast with it. Crazy that this is only on VHS, and I really hope that gets remedied at some point soon. But for now, that's the case. Very fun. Enemy Territory. Okay, I just talked about this one on our Halloween Horrorthon episode 2024 of Pure Cinema. We had different categories. We're planning sort of an all-nighter from 6 to 6. And one of the categories is slashers, and this movie's called Fatal Pulse. And this was a recommendation from my good friend Phil Blankenship, who programs at the New Beverly and who you can hear every month on our show on the calendar episodes where we talk about the New Beverly calendar. And Phil has an incredible, astonishing VHS collection. And it was one of those things where I saw some pictures of it, and that was one of the inspirations for me to be like, oh, wow, there's so much stuff that is still unavailable. And Phil's been collecting for years, so he has a deep knowledge of genre cinema, but these little deep cuts. I was gonna do 2 Phil picks in this video, but I'm just gonna do one, and this is Fatal Pulse. So kind of a campus slasher, black glove killer. There's a weird handyman played by Joe Estevez that definitely looks like he could be the guy. But, these women are being killed on campus. There's our main dude who is on the outs with his girlfriend, or they're sort of breaking up. And he starts to get blamed for it, and then it's a matter of, like, who really did it. And it's got this really funny, goofy sidekick guy, kind of a stoner dude, who just shows up every once in a while and makes ridiculous comments about having to go watch Green Acres because this is the one where Arnold gets laid, and there's literally the movie makes the choice to, like, after his first appearance, every time he shows up, there's like this boing sound effect that happens on the soundtrack, which I've never seen in a movie before, and which is highly entertaining and silly. But it's ultimately like a fun underseen slasher, and this tape is also relatively hard to find. There is a soft rip on YouTube you could watch, but I much preferred this VHS version. There are some of these on eBay, and I think these are a little pricier, like $35-$40. But definitely a rare one and a fun slasher if you're looking for more of that. This is another one that was kind of pricey. This one I discovered through the Video Archives podcast when they had Joe Dante on as a guest, and he brought this movie as his pick. And it is a movie called The Fool Killer. As you can see, it stars Anthony Perkins, and then it has Dana Elcar and Edward Albert. Anthony Perkins joins a runaway boy on the road to mystery and murder in this wild, intriguing adventure. Mistreated and misunderstood, George, a 12-year-old orphan, runs away from his foster home. Hopping freight trains, George follows the open road to misadventure and the companionship of Dirty Jim, a crusty old kindred spirit. That's, of course, Anthony Perkins. Jim mesmerizes young George with a fantastic tale of the Fool Killer, a mythical murderer who stands 8 feet tall. Separated from Jim by sickness and fate, George finds another friend in Milo, a tall Civil War veteran with amnesia. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Anthony Perkins. Jim is just this old guy that he meets. My bad. Though the pair share a carefree friendship on the highway vagabonds, George slowly suspects Milo is in fact the real-life axe-wielding murderer of Jim's horrific tale. At once enchanting lyrical drama and a tense, gripping thriller, The Fool Killer is remarkable entertainment for all ages. Now, this is directed by... Oh, shoot. These tapes don't always list directors, unfortunately. Director Servando Gonzalez. And on our Discoveries episode, I think in 2022, Gala Avery talked about another one of his films. Like, I think he's a Mexican filmmaker. And... it sounded fascinating, the other one. But this one is maybe along the lines of like a Night of the Hunter-ish kind of thing, but not quite as menacing. But I was really excited to get a hold of this tape because this one, for whatever reason, I don't know, is definitely not available outside of VHS, and is one that I don't know if it's coming. So I'm very glad to have it. I love Anthony Perkins. I love pre and post Psycho Anthony Perkins, and this is definitely one of his better performances that's lesser known. This one is a Quentin Tarantino recommendation. It's called Hotline. It's a little faded. It's obviously a tape that was at the front of a video store display. I don't know if you ever used to go in video stores and they had certain walls that were facing the sunlight, and you could tell those tapes just got blasted with sunlight and were almost always bleached, and it was always kind of a rough thing for me to watch because I'm just like, oh man, if anybody ever buys these, those are totally wiped out. So this one is also super rare and was not easy to find. There is a rip of this on YouTube that I just don't, it's not great. But Quentin turned us on to this one on our Pure Cinema with him, and it's about Linda Carter, Wonder Woman, plays a bartender named Brian, which I think is very funny, who starts getting these calls, these haunting phone calls, and then you find out it's a murderer and he's on the loose, and she's only worked for 2 days at a crisis hotline when these bizarre calls begin, and the voice always says, "Hello, Brian," and so yeah, it just becomes like sort of a mystery slashery kind of thing. It was a TV movie, I believe, originally, but a pretty intense TV movie. But this is a USA VHS release. Yeah, definitely a movie. It's also got Steve Forrest in it, but definitely a fun thriller TV movie. And I know Scream Factory, I think, at one point said, yeah, we're putting it out. And then obviously there was some issue because they had to cancel it. I'm pretty sure it was actually almost like officially announced and then retracted. So there's clearly some issue with this one, which is another reason I wanted to get this tape. But it's a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of that one. This is another one that I think I knew about before, but it is actually kind of a Phil Blankenship recommendation. There are a lot of Deliverance type movies, Deliverance knockoffs. This is bad news in the woods with rednecks and hillbillies, and that's what this is. It's called Hunter's Blood. It's from 1986. Yeah. It started in fun. It ended in sheer savage terror. 5 city boys head for the country to hunt deer, let loose, and have a good time. But a pack of maniacal hillbilly poachers roam the thick, unforgiving backwoods, intent on keeping outsiders away from the forest and their illegal operations. A brutal, nightmarish attack on the hunters begins, leaving the city boys scrambling from bloody, butchering hillbilly hands. A fanatical vision of horror and torment, Hunter's Blood brings a deliverance quality of fear to the forest. It's deadly, explosive entertainment. And this cast is pretty good. It's Sam Bottoms, Kim Delaney, Clu Gulager, Ken Swafford, Joey Travolta, and directed by Robert C. Hughes. And I don't really know Robert C. Hughes. This one's not that hard to find. I mean, it's out there. It's an embassy tape, and it's a good solid one. This is another that might have a YouTube rip, but like I said, I'm done relying on that stuff and seeing how good VHS actually still looks on my TV. I was just like, this is one I want to have until, or maybe not, this comes out on a disc. These are a lot of really solid movies, and so I'm always kind of like, why hasn't somebody put this out? There must be some problem. I think that's why 2024 felt like the right time for me to start back up with VHS, because I'm like, if something hasn't come out by now, I mean, look at all, we talk about Blu-rays and DVDs, or Blu-rays and 4Ks coming out and getting announced, throughout the year. It is a golden era. It is, it's not the end of physical media, but you can definitely feel a pressure or an urgency from the labels to like, we got to get this out. This is stuff that's got to be out there. And so, I'm just surprised that a lot of this stuff hasn't come out, which makes me think there might be some issue. And that's part of the reason I thought, okay, this is the year to do it. I'm going to start collecting these, and let's see if some of them do come out. I'm going to roll the dice. But I'd rather have them and, in effect, have an archive of the media itself, as opposed to relying on, the whims of, again, a YouTube or a streaming service. Some of this stuff will pop up from time to time on Amazon Prime or Tubi, but you just never know how long those licenses are in place for. And I don't know. I just would much rather have it. It's like we talk about streaming versus physical. You can always go to your discs. Well, the same thing for VHS. This stuff is rarer and even harder to find. This one you'll probably know. This is a Paul Schrader movie from 1987. called Light of Day. It stars Michael J. Fox, Jenna Rollins, and of course Joan Jett. And Michael J. Fox and Joan Jett play brother and sister. Jenna Rollins is their mom. She's a single mother. He lives with her, I think, and they live in, is it Detroit? Superstar Michael J. Fox, rocker Joan Jett, and Academy Award nominee Jenna Rollins, star in Light of Day, filmmaker Paul Schrader's hard-hitting look at Heartland America and the power of rock and roll. Music to The Only Escape for siblings Joe and Patty Resnick, and Patty's words, 1 hour on stage makes up for the other 23. Michael J. Fox is Joe, devoted brother, blue-collar worker, and guitarist in the Barbusters, an undiscovered local rock band, which also features Michael McKean. Featuring him and his sister Patty, Joan Jett, in her acclaimed film debut as Patty, sister singer, unwed mother, and family rebel caught in the unrelenting mother-daughter conflict with Jenna Rollins. Patty and Joe live their lives for that one spot-lit hour on stage in the sweaty, smoke-filled clubs in and around Cleveland. My bad, it's Cleveland. They find their happiness living the dream with the Barbusters. When the lights go down, their world lights up. So it is in a way kind of along the lines of Blue Collar, and then it's blue collar workers and the sort of drama of their lives unfolding and stuff like that, and trying to find a way to do the things that they want to do while paying the rent. But it's got a really fun soundtrack, and Joan Jett obviously does her own singing. I can't remember. Michael does too. Joan definitely does. And the title track is great, and they have some other songs in here that are fun. But I'm gonna guess it's, you never know if it's music rights or if it's the company that produced the film went under and sold their holdings to some other company, like the case we've talked about with like Heartbreak Kid, where like a cosmetics company owns those movies and they don't care about them and they just don't know what they're worth, and they're always going to ask for more money than they're worth because it means nothing to them. So this could have fallen in with one of those. Again, music is involved, so you always got to go, maybe it's music rights. But it is a really nice drama, and one that I think is underseen at this point. Another one that might be on YouTube, but you never know for how long. Good cast, interesting Schrader movie. This is one of my favorite things in the world right now, this movie. I discovered this one last year. It's called Lies. It's from 1983. And it's directed and written by two guys, Jim and Ken Wheat. And they would go on to do After Midnight, the horror anthology. They did one of the Battle for Endor, maybe TV movie, Star Wars. And then they wrote on the Pitch Black movies. But this is their debut, and it is something special, let me tell you. So special that, in fact, for my 50th birthday, rented out a little screening room, and I played two movies to an unsuspecting crowd because there were a bunch of my friends, about 25 people, and I didn't tell them what, in the tradition of Phil Blankenship, who does these, marathons at the New Beverly. In fact, I just went to the annual horror show at the New Beverly last week, and it was a blast. It's 6 movies, and you don't know any of them, what they're going to be, and you just sit down and let them roll out in front of you, and it is an absolute joy to me to go into a movie with no expectations. It's the best possible way. You literally have nothing, and so you just have to let the movie take you over. And so Lies was my opener, and it is a very twisty, you could say maybe Brian De Palma-esque thing, where you have a woman played by, is it Ann Dusenberg? Ann Dusenberry, excuse me, who's a struggling actress who gets a gig. Actually had to play a rip of the VHS because we didn't have a VHS player in the screening room. But again, this is the only way this is available. You might be able to find this on YouTube if you look up like Lies 1985 or Lies Jim and Ken Wheat or something. But it's very twisty. It has a certain kind of an opening that at first you're like, what the heck was that about? Then it goes into this story about Ann Dusenberry and being an actress and getting hired for this role that may not be a role, or it's unclear what's happening. I really don't want. It's one of those I actually don't want to spoil because it went over so well with my friends that I'd rather that you watch it and maybe don't read much about it, because it's such a gem. It's so much fun, and I just really wish this was more available. Nobody's seen this movie because it hasn't been available since this VHS came out, and so it's one that I stumped the band with. And it was a group of my friends tend to be pretty cine literate, and none of them had seen it, and they just loved it. So one of my biggest and most favorite discoveries is Lies, which, again, I wish it wasn't only VHS, but maybe we'll get lucky at some point. This is one that more people definitely know. A favorite of ours on Pure Cinema. This is Night of the Juggler, starring James Brolin, Cliff Gorman, this is a pretty rare one, and also wasn't cheap. It's a Columbia movie. I don't know why it hasn't come out. It's another one where I'm like, what's going on? Why isn't this available? But basically, James Brolin plays an ex-cop who is now, I think, is he a trucker? Is he driving a truck, I think? But what ends up happening is that there's a criminal faction in New York that wants to kidnap the daughter of a rich guy, and they end up kidnapping his daughter instead. And so it ends up being sort of a race against time, running around New York, him trying to find his daughter in some very creepy kidnapping circumstances. And it's like I said, it's gritty. It is exciting, and has a great Mandy Patinkin as a cabbie cameo. But it is dirty old New York at its finest, and it's just a real gem, and one that, like I said, we love a lot on the show. Another one that maybe has a YouTube rip, but one that, because it hasn't come out yet on any format officially outside of VHS, I was like, that's one I want to get. That's one I need to own. I really, really like this film, and a little more expensive, in the 40 to 50 range. Again, I sold off a whole bunch of stuff. I had some money that I was putting directly towards this. So it was kind of an investment for me to do this, because some of these were not easy to find outside of eBay, and they tend to be a little more expensive there, unfortunately. But definitely a great movie, well worth watching if you haven't seen it. Last one for this round is another one that I think is known, but definitely not well known enough for as good as it is, and that's Nightlife. This one's from 1990. It is let's see here. It stars Scott Grimes from Critters, and let's see, Cheryl Pollack, Anthony Geary. A lot of folks I don't know, but I know my friend Patrick Bromley's a big fan of this one too. This one I didn't see until, and maybe Patrick actually recommended it, and I think I bought a burned DVD off of eBay that it didn't turn out to be that great, although there are some more of those that I think are a little better, because this was on Laserdisc as well, and I think that I bought sometimes I would buy a VHS and a backup DVD version for screening purposes, because if I want to show to friends, a lot of my friends don't have VHS anymore, which I get. But yeah, so there's a Laserdisc dub on a DVD, I think, on eBay. But when the four snobby classmates who have been harassing him are suddenly killed in an auto accident, teenage mortician Archie Melville, that's Scott Grimes, gets the gruesome job of preparing their bodies for burial. But an electrical storm reanimates the corpses, creating four invincible ghouls hungry for food, sex, and revenge. John Astin, Revenge of the Killer Tomatoes, Addams Family. Anthony Geary also star as the not-so-innocent victims of these very twisted zombies. Campy and macabre, Nightlife puts a comic spin on the classic horror story. And yeah, this is a lot of fun. It's kind of a coming-of-age romance zombie movie that should be like right up there with Night of the Comet and, I don't know, Revenge of the Living Dead or something. I mean, it's a little funnier than those in some ways, but I like Scott Grimes. I think he's a lot of fun, and it's just one of those that you're just like, why isn't this better known? Oh, it's because it hasn't been available, and it's sort of dropped away. But I feel like even when it was on VHS, this would have been the kind of movie that we would have talked about. When I worked at the video store, we definitely didn't have a copy of this at my video store, And I think even our local art house, much more packed with, cinephile movies video store down the block, didn't have this either. Because again, I feel like this is a movie that it's just a video store kind of movie. The kind of movie that the video store employee comes across and you just tell everybody about it. And then soon everybody in the store is telling anybody that wants to rent a horror movie about it. And then it becomes like a local phenomenon. And I feel like a lot of those movies had pockets of fandoms around the country. And this one should have. And I don't fully get why. Maybe it was just a smaller run of tapes. This is a Columbia tape, RCA Columbia. So I would think there would have been a decent amount of them. But for whatever reason, it has not remained in the public consciousness, but is a great one for October if you haven't seen it. Definitely worth your time. So anyway, that'll do it for this round of 10 VHS only titles that I think you should check out. Let me know if you want more of this stuff, because I definitely have at least 10 more that I could talk about, and maybe more than that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, folks. There's a lot of stuff out there that's not on any disc format and is not streaming. And if you're looking to discover things, there's certainly a lot of discs you can do that with. VHS is definitely not something you have to resort to. But I think at some point, these movies are going to be lost if we don't keep talking about them. And I think it's always good to give ideas to boutique labels. If they think people don't know about a movie, then they maybe won't bother with it. So that's part of the reason I like to talk about them here and on the Pure Cinema Show. We like to make people aware of them and then get them asking the labels, hey, where is this? Can you put this out? I think I saw somebody sent an email to Vinegar Syndrome and was like, can you guys put out Lies? And I was like, oh, great. That's wonderful. Maybe that'll get them on the ball, because those are the guys who know how to track this stuff down. I don't know how to figure out rights for some of these things and how hard it would be to do it and what the snags are. And maybe some of these just are never going to happen. And that's another reason to hold on to them. But, with any luck, some of these might come out on disc, this year, next year, who knows when. But for now, they're VHS only, and I do recommend them. And I thank you so much for listening and watching. Okay, bye-bye.